My name is Megan, and I grew up believing my father was just an ordinary, hardworking dad. Every month, like clockwork, he'd pack his bags for a 3-day business trip to Cincinnati. It was as routine as dinner on Sundays or movie night on Fridays. Dad would kiss Mom goodbye, ruffle my hair, and tell me to take care of things while he was gone. I never questioned it, not once in 22 years. Not until that Saturday in July when everything I thought I knew about my family unraveled with a single joke. It was my cousin Amber's graduation barbecue, the kind of family gathering where the adults drink too much and start saying things they normally wouldn't. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across my aunt and uncle's backyard. The smell of charcoal still hung in the air, though most of the food was gone. I was sitting at a picnic table, half listening to my little cousin's story about his science project, when I heard my Uncle Mike's booming laugh from across the yard. "Tom's heading to Cincinnati again next week, right, Diane?" he called out to my mom, who was helping clear paper plates from the tables. "Man, he must love his second family more than us." Everyone laughed, even my mom forced a smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. But I didn't laugh. I couldn't. The words second family echoed in my head like a gunshot in an empty room. It was just a joke. That's what everyone would say later. Just Uncle Mike being his usual inappropriate self after too many beers. But the way my mom's smile faltered, the way Aunt Susan shot Mike a warning glance, the sudden awkward silence that followed. It all felt wrong. "What does that mean?" I asked, my voice cutting through the forced laughter. Uncle Mike waved his hand dismissively. "Nothing, kid. Just giving your mom a hard time about your dad's work schedule." But the damage was done. I looked at my mom, expecting her to roll her eyes or make some comment about Uncle Mike's bad jokes. Instead, she turned away, busying herself with gathering more trash. "Mom?" I pressed. "It's nothing, Megan," she said quietly. "Just Mike being Mike." The conversation shifted quickly to Amber's college plans, but I couldn't focus. My mind was stuck on those 3 words, his second family. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. I smiled when appropriate, helped clean up, hugged relatives goodbye, but inside a storm was brewing. On the drive home, I tried to broach the subject with my mom. What was Uncle Mike talking about? That joke about Dad's trips? My mom's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Your uncle has a bad sense of humor, especially after a few drinks. Don't pay him any attention." "But why would he joke about that specifically, about Dad having another family?" She sighed, keeping her eyes fixed on the road. "Megan, please, it was a tasteless joke, nothing more." But something in her voice, a slight tremor I'd never noticed before, told me there was more to this story, much more. When we got home, I went straight to my room, my mind racing. Dad was due back from his latest business trip tomorrow. I'd never once questioned these trips. They were just part of our life, like the family car or the creaky step on our front porch. But now, memories began to surface, taking on new suspicious shapes. Dad never brought back souvenirs from Cincinnati. He rarely talked about what he did there. When I was 16 and needed his signature for a school trip that fell during one of his business trips, he'd been strangely reluctant to reschedule. Phone calls during these trips were always brief, and he always called us, never the other way around. I sat on my bed, pulling my laptop closer. It was time to do some digging. First, I checked Dad's social media, not that he used it much, nothing unusual there. Then I remembered something. Last Christmas, Dad had given Mom a new phone and helped her transfer everything from her old one. But the old phone ended up in the junk drawer in the kitchen instead of being recycled. My heart pounding, I crept downstairs. Mom was in the living room watching TV, the blue light flickering across her face in the darkened room. She didn't look up as I slipped into the kitchen and quietly opened the junk drawer. There it was, buried beneath takeout menus and spare batteries. Mom's old phone. Back in my room, I plugged it in, praying it would still turn on. After a few moments, the screen glowed to life. It wasn't password protected. Mom had never been tech-savvy enough to bother. I opened her messages, scrolling through conversations with family members and friends, until I found Dad's name. Most of the texts were mundane, grocery reminders, schedule coordination. the digital equivalent of sticky notes left on the refrigerator. But then I saw it. A conversation from 3 years ago. Mom had texted Dad during one of his trips. "Call when you can. Need to discuss Megan's college visit." Dad's response made my blood run cold. "Can't talk now. With Lisa and Ethan. We'll call tomorrow." Lisa and Ethan. Not colleagues, not clients. Names my father had never once mentioned to me. My fingers trembled as I kept scrolling, finding more messages that made no sense in the context of a business trip. "Tell the kids I said goodnight. Bring back some of that special honey from the farmer's market there. How's Ethan doing with his baseball tryouts?" Each message was another crack in the foundation of what I thought was my life. But I needed more. I needed to be sure. I opened the browser on my laptop and typed in a search: how to find someone's address. It took hours. I created fake social media accounts to search for any Lisa connected to Cincinnati who might match what little I knew. I cross-referenced phone numbers, searched public records, and finally, at 3 a.m., I found her. Lisa Mercer lives in Cincinnati, has a public Facebook profile with limited information but enough photos to show she has a son around 14 named Ethan. And in one photo, partially obscured but unmistakable, was my father's watch, the distinctive vintage Omega my grandfather had given him that he never took off. I stared at the screen, feeling like I might throw up. It wasn't just a mistress. It wasn't just an affair. It was a whole other life. With shaking hands, I kept digging, finding Lisa's address, looking at property records. The house had been purchased 8 years ago, co-owned by T. Mercer. T. Mercer, Thomas Mercer, my father's name. I must have fallen asleep at some point because I woke to sunlight streaming through my window and the sound of the front door opening. Dad was home. For a moment I lay there hoping it had all been a nightmare. But my laptop was still open to Lisa Mercer's Facebook page, the evidence undeniable. I heard my parents' voices downstairs, the familiar rhythm of my dad's footsteps, the sound of his suitcase being set down. The normality of it all felt obscene now. I don't remember getting dressed or walking downstairs. I just remember standing in the kitchen doorway, watching my father pour himself a cup of coffee like it was any other Sunday morning. "Morning, Pumpkin," he said with a smile. "Miss me?" Words failed me. All the accusations, all the questions I'd rehearsed in my head, none of them would come out. Instead, I walked to the kitchen table and set down my laptop, turned so he could see the screen. Lisa Mercer's profile. The photo with his watch. The property records I'd found. The color drained from his face so quickly I thought he might faint. "Megan," he started, his voice a whisper. "I can explain." "Explain what, Dad? That you have another family? That everything you've ever told me is a lie?" My mother appeared in the doorway, her face pale. "What's going on?" I turned to her, the betrayal cutting deeper. "You knew, didn't you? All this time you knew." She didn't answer, but her eyes filled with tears, and that was answer enough. 14 years, I said, turning back to my father. "Ethan looks about 14 in these pictures. You've been living a double life for 14 years. Half my life, Dad." "It's complicated, Megan," my father said, setting down his coffee cup with a shaking hand. "Is that his real name, Ethan, or is that fake too?" "It's his name," my father admitted quietly. "He's your half-brother." The word brother hit me like a physical blow. I had a brother, a teenage brother I'd never met, never known existed. "Does he know about me?" I asked. My father looked down. "No, he thinks I travel for work when I'm here with you." The symmetry was sickening. 2 families, each unaware of the other. 2 children, each fed the same lies. "Why?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Why would you do this?" My father sank into a chair, suddenly looking older than I'd ever seen him. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. Lisa and it started as an affair. I was going to end it, but then she got pregnant with Ethan and I couldn't just abandon my son. So you decided to live 2 separate lives instead? To lie to everyone?" "I loved you both," he said, as if that explained everything. "I couldn't bear to lose either family." My mother, still standing in the doorway, finally spoke. "I found out when Ethan was 2. Your father confessed everything, begged me to forgive him, said he'd end it. Her voice was hollow. But he couldn't. And I couldn't bear to break up our family, to put you through that. So you both decided to lie to me instead, I said, the betrayal from both parents now complete. Year after year, lie after lie. We were protecting you, my mother insisted. No, I shook my head. You were protecting yourselves. Your image. Your comfortable arrangement. My father reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Megan, please, try to understand. Understand what? That my entire childhood was built on a foundation of lies? That every time you said you loved me, you were saying the same thing to another kid in another house? That you've been playing house with 2 different families for 14 years? He had no answer for that. And you, I turned to my mother, you let this happen. You knew he had another child, another life, and you just, pretended it wasn't happening? I did what I thought was best for you, she said, tears streaming down her face now. I didn't want you to grow up without your father. But this is worse, I said, my voice breaking. Finding out like this, realizing my entire life has been a lie, this is so much worse. The 3 of us stood in that kitchen, the truth finally laid bare between us. The perfect family I thought we were had never existed. It was all a carefully constructed illusion, maintained by lies and monthly business trips. What happens now? I finally asked. My father looked up, his eyes red. I don't know. I never wanted either of you to find out this way. But you were fine with us never finding out at all, I said, with taking this secret to your grave. He didn't deny it. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Does anyone else know, besides Uncle Mike and Aunt Susan? My mother shook her head. Just them. Mike found out by accident years ago when he ran into your father in Cincinnati. We swore them to secrecy. Well, Uncle Mike's not very good at keeping secrets after 5 beers, I said bitterly. An uncomfortable silence fell. What do you say when your entire family narrative has been shattered? When the people you trusted most turn out to be expert liars? I closed my laptop, suddenly needing to be anywhere but there. I need some air. Megan, please, my mother reached for me. We should talk about this as a family. Family? I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. Which one? This fake one here or the other fake one in Cincinnati? Because it seems like neither one actually exists. I grabbed my keys and walked out the door, ignoring their calls for me to come back. I drove aimlessly for hours, trying to process what I'd learned. My father had another wife, or partner, I wasn't clear on their exact arrangement. Another son, another home, another life entirely. All those birthdays and school events when I'd wished he didn't have to travel for work, he wasn't working at all. He was just with his other family, his other child. How many of my milestones had he missed for Ethan's? How many of Ethan's had he missed for mine? I ended up at my best friend Zoe's apartment. She took one look at my face and pulled me inside without questions, sitting me down on her couch and making tea while I tried to find the words to explain what had happened. My dad has another family, I finally blurted out, in Cincinnati, a partner named Lisa and a son named Ethan. Zoe's eyes widened. Holy shit, Meg, are you serious? I nodded, the reality of it hitting me in waves. All those business trips. He was just going to his other family for 14 years. And your mom? She's known for 12 of those years. She decided it was better for me not to know. Zoe sat beside me, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. I don't even know what to say. That's beyond messed up. I leaned into her, grateful for the comfort. I have a brother, Zoe, a 14-year-old brother who doesn't know I exist. What are you going to do? It was the question I'd been asking myself all day. What does one do when they discover their entire family dynamic is a lie? When the father they looked up to turns out to be living a double life? I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to never speak to either of them again. Part of me wants to call this Lisa woman and tell her everything. And part of me just wants to pretend I never found out and go back to how things were. But I knew that wasn't possible. You can't unknow something like this. You can't unsee the cracks once they're revealed. I stayed at Zoe's that night, unable to face going home. My phone buzzed constantly with texts and calls from both parents, but I ignored them all. I needed time to think, to decide what I wanted to do with this information that had turned my world upside down. The next morning I woke up with a clarity I hadn't expected. I knew what I needed to do. I drove home, finding both my parents sitting at the kitchen table, looking like they hadn't slept. They both jumped up when I walked in. "Megan, thank God," my mother started. "We were so worried." "I'm fine," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I've been thinking about everything, and I've made some decisions." They looked at me with apprehension as I set my keys on the counter. "First, I'm moving out. I've been saving for an apartment anyway, and Zoe's been looking for a roommate. I can't stay in this house anymore." My mother's face crumpled, but I pressed on. "Second, I want to meet him, Ethan, my brother." My father's eyes widened. "Megan, I don't think that's a good idea." "It's not up to you anymore, Dad. You lost the right to make these decisions when you decided to lie to both your families for 14 years. "He doesn't know about you," my father said weakly. "It would destroy him." "Like it's destroying me," I countered. "He deserves the truth, just like I did, and if you won't tell him, I will." The threat hung in the air between us. My father looked genuinely frightened for the first time. "Please," he said, "give me some time. Let me figure out how to handle this." "You've had 14 years to figure it out," I said coldly. "You're out of time." My mother, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. "What do you want, Megan? Really, do you want to blow up another child's life just because yours has been disrupted?" Her words stung, but they also gave me pause. Did I have the right to make this decision for Ethan? To turn his world upside down just because mine had been? "I want the truth," I said finally. "All of it. No more lies, no more secrets. And then I want you to tell Ethan. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. He deserves to know he has a sister, just like I deserve to know I had a brother." My father nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll tell him, but please, let me do it my way. Let me try to minimize the damage." I almost laughed at that, as if there was a way to tell your teenage son that his entire family dynamic was a lie without causing damage. "You have 1 month," I said firmly. "After that, I want to meet my brother, whether you've told him or not." It was an ultimatum, and we all knew it. My father nodded again, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Over the next few weeks, I moved in with Zoe, only returning to my parents' house to pick up more of my things. Each visit was tense, filled with attempted conversations and aborted apologies. My mother kept trying to explain her side, as if there was anything she could say that would make her complicity okay. "I thought I was doing what was best for our family," she said during one of my brief visits. "I couldn't bear the thought of losing your father, of you growing up without him." "But I did grow up without him," I replied. "Half the time he was with his other family. The only difference is, I didn't know why he was absent." She had no response to that. As the 1-month deadline approached, my father became increasingly anxious. He called me almost daily, asking for more time, making excuses, but I stood firm. This had gone on long enough. Exactly 1 month after I discovered the truth, I texted my father. "Have you told him?" His response came an hour later. "Yes, yesterday. It didn't go well." I wasn't surprised. How could it go well? I texted back, "I want to meet him." Another hour passed before he responded. "He's angry, confused. He doesn't want to meet you right now." The words hurt more than I expected. It wasn't Ethan's fault, of course. He was going through the same shock and betrayal I had experienced a month ago, but still, the rejection stung. "Tell him I understand," I wrote back. "When he's ready, if he's ever ready, I'm here." Days turned into weeks. I settled into my new apartment with Zoe, started therapy to process the betrayal, and tried to build a new normal for myself. My relationship with my parents remained strained. We talked occasionally, mostly practical matters, but the easy comfort we once shared was gone. Then, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, I received a text from an unknown number. "Hey, it's Ethan, your brother, I guess. Dad gave me your number. Can we talk?" My heart raced as I responded, "Yes, anytime." We arranged to meet at a coffee shop halfway between our cities the following Saturday. I arrived early, my stomach in knots, scanning every teenage boy who walked through the door. And then he was there, standing awkwardly by the entrance. I recognized him immediately from the photos I'd seen, but they hadn't captured the way his eyebrows furrowed exactly like mine when he was uncertain, or how he had our father's posture, slightly hunched forward as if perpetually in a hurry. I raised my hand in a small wave, and he walked over, sliding into the chair across from me. "So," he said, after a moment of awkward silence. "This is weird." I couldn't help but laugh. "Yeah, extremely weird. Did you know, before you—" I shook my head. "No. I found out because my uncle made a joke at a family barbecue. Dad sat me down and told me everything, said he wouldn't blame me if I hated him." Ethan fidgeted with a sugar packet. "Mom's been crying for weeks." "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it. "This isn't your fault. Or your mom's, I guess." He shrugged. "Not yours either." Another silence fell, but less awkward this time. I studied his face, looking for similarities, differences. He had our father's eyes, my grandmother's nose. "So you're in college?" he asked finally. "Graduating next spring? You're in 9th grade?" 10th, he corrected. "I play baseball." Dad mentioned that, in a text he didn't know I saw. Ethan's mouth twisted in a wry smile. "This is so messed up." "Completely messed up," I agreed. But as we sat there, awkwardly finding our way through this strange new reality, I felt something unexpected. Connection. This boy across from me was my brother. We shared blood, history, even if that history had been carefully segregated by our father's duplicity. We talked for hours that day, sharing stories of our parallel lives, comparing notes on the father we thought we knew. It wasn't a magical Hollywood reunion. It was awkward and painful and sometimes funny in the darkest way, but it was real, which was more than anything in my family had been for a very long time. As we were saying goodbye, Ethan hesitated, then asked, "What happens now, with all of us, I mean?" I shook my head. "I don't know. I'm still figuring out how to have a relationship with Dad after all this. And your mom?" "She wants to meet you," Ethan said suddenly. "Not today, but someday. She said you're as much a victim in this as we are." The words surprised me. I had imagined Lisa as a villain in this story, the other woman who had taken my father away. But of course, she was just another person, caught in my father's web of lies. "Maybe someday," I agreed. "But for now, maybe we could just get to know each other?" Ethan nodded. "Yeah, I'd like that." As I drove home that evening, I thought about the strange new shape my family had taken. The perfect unit I thought we were had been shattered beyond repair. But from those broken pieces, something new was forming, messy and painful and real. My father had spent 14 years trying to maintain two separate, perfect families. In the end, his deception had destroyed them both. But maybe, just maybe, from the wreckage, an honest relationship could emerge. Not just between Ethan and me, but eventually between all of us. It wouldn't be the family I thought I had. It wouldn't be perfect or even close to normal, but it would be real, and after a lifetime of living in a carefully constructed lie, real was all I wanted. I don't know what the future holds for my broken family. I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive my parents for their deception, or if Ethan will either. I don't know if Lisa and my mother will ever be able to be in the same room together, or if my father will ever truly understand the damage his choices caused. But I do know this: the truth, however painful, is better than the most comfortable lie, and sometimes it takes everything falling apart before something genuine can finally take its place.